Have you ever watched someone take what's yours and felt that burning need for justice? Well, today we're diving into a top-voted Reddit story about a night out that turned into the perfect revenge served ice cold. Let's start reading this satisfying tale of instant karma. The bass from the sound system thrummed through my chest as I settled into the high stool at our table, the kind that made you feel like you were perched above the chaos of the resto bar below. It was one of those Friday nights in Quezon City where the work week's stress melted away with every sip of ice-cold beer, and my girlfriends and I had claimed our territory, a small round table with four precious bar stools in a place that clearly didn't believe in giving everyone a seat. The place was packed, as usual. Bodies moved between tables like a choreographed dance, some clutching drinks, others vaping clouds that mixed with the dim lighting to create an almost ethereal haze. Most people stood, leaning against walls or hovering near tables, waiting for their turn at one of the coveted seats. It was the kind of establishment where musical chairs wasn't just a childhood game, it was survival. "I'll be right back," Maya announced, sliding off her stool with the grace of someone who'd had just enough alcohol to feel confident, but not enough to stumble. Bathroom break. Her empty stool sat there like a placeholder, still warm from her presence. The three of us remaining, Jenna, Carla, and I, continued our animated discussion about our boss's latest impossible deadline, our voices rising and falling with the rhythm of shared frustration and camaraderie. That's when he appeared. He moved through the crowd with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd never been told no in his life. Polo shirt pressed to perfection, hair styled with what looked like half a bottle of product, and a vape pen that seemed permanently attached to his lips like some kind of modern-day cigarette holder. The cloud of sweet-scented vapor that followed him announced his arrival before his actions did. Without a word, not even a glance in our direction, he reached for Maya's stool. "Hey," I called out, my voice cutting through the ambient noise. "Someone's sitting there." He paused, one hand still gripping the back of the stool, and turned to look at me with the kind of slow, deliberate movement that suggested he was doing me a favor by acknowledging my existence at all. His eyes held that particular brand of arrogance I'd seen in men who thought their presence was a gift to any establishment they graced. "Well, she's not here now, is she?" he said, his voice carrying the tone of someone stating an obvious fact to a child. The casual dismissal in his voice made my jaw clench, but something about his demeanor, the way he stood there like he owned the place, the smirk that played at the corners of his mouth, told me that escalating this moment would only feed whatever superiority complex he was nursing. So I bit my tongue and watched as he dragged Maya's stool across the floor with a screech that made everyone within a 10-foot radius wince. "Unbelievable," Jenna muttered under her breath. But we all stayed seated, that uncomfortable feeling of injustice settling in our stomachs like bad food. When Maya returned 5 minutes later, her face cycled through confusion, then understanding, then resignation as she took in the scene. Her stool sat at a table of four guys who were now laughing loudly at something on one of their phones, completely oblivious to, or perhaps deliberately ignoring, the awkwardness they'd created. "It's fine," Maya said, though her tone suggested it was anything but. She stood beside our table, one hand resting on my shoulder for balance, her weight shifting from foot to foot in the universal dance of someone trying to get comfortable while standing in heels. But it wasn't fine, not really. And as I watched her try to engage in our conversation while clearly uncomfortable, I felt that familiar burn of righteous indignation building in my chest. 20 minutes passed. The guys at his table had grown louder, their laughter more boisterous, their vape clouds thicker. Then, like some cosmic gift, they all stood up in unison. "Smoke break," one of them announced, and they filed toward the exit like a small parade of entitlement. I didn't hesitate. The moment they were out of sight, I stood up, walked over to their table, and wrapped my fingers around the back of the stolen stool. It felt heavier than I'd expected, or maybe that was just the weight of what I was about to do. But as I dragged it back to our table, the same screech echoing through the bar, I felt a satisfaction that was almost electrical. "What are you doing?" Carla asked, though her grin suggested she already knew and approved. "Research," I replied, settling the stool back in its rightful place. Maya's face lit up as she finally sat down, the relief visible in the way her shoulders relaxed. But I wasn't done. I caught the eye of one of the staff members, a young woman with kind eyes who'd been weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency all night. She approached our table with a questioning look. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice low and conversational. "See that table over there? The guys who just left? One of them took our friend's stool earlier without asking, and she's been standing for 20 minutes. We just took it back." She followed my gaze to the now empty table, understanding dawning on her face. "Ah, I see. Noted, ma'am," she said with a subtle nod that suggested this wasn't her first rodeo with entitled customers. When Polo Shirt Guy returned with his entourage, the change in his demeanor was immediate and dramatic. He stopped short when he saw his missing stool, his eyes scanning the room like a predator who'd lost track of his prey. When his gaze landed on our table, on Maya sitting comfortably in what he clearly still considered his property, his face darkened. He strode over with the kind of purposeful anger that made conversations pause at nearby tables. "That's mine," he said, pointing at the stool like he was identifying stolen goods in a police lineup. I took a deliberate sip of my beer, the condensation from the bottle cool against my palm, and looked up at him with the same casual indifference he'd shown us earlier. The taste of victory was sweeter than the San Miguel. "Well, you're not sitting now, are you?" The silence that followed was pregnant with tension. His friends had stopped their chatter and were watching the exchange with the kind of eager anticipation people get when they sense drama brewing. Other patrons had begun to take notice too, conversations dropping to whispers as they tuned into our standoff. His face cycled through several shades of red before he spun on his heel and marched toward the staff member I'd spoken with earlier. I watched the exchange with fascination, his animated gesturing, her professional but firm responses, the way his shoulders sagged slightly with each word she spoke. When he returned, there was something different about his posture. The swagger was gone, replaced by the stiff-backed walk of someone trying to salvage their dignity after a public defeat. "Sorry, sir," I could hear the staff member saying behind him, her voice carrying just enough to reach our table. "No more extra seats available. You can stand and wait for one to free up." And stand he did. For the rest of the night, he remained beside his table like a monument to his own poor judgment, his friends occasionally offering to share their stools, but his pride apparently too wounded to accept. The electric fan mounted nearby became his unwilling accomplice, sending periodic gusts of air that lifted his carefully styled hair into wild, unpredictable shapes that made him look less like the smooth operator he'd tried to project and more like someone who'd stuck their finger in a light socket. Every few minutes, I'd catch him glancing our way, his expression cycling between anger and something that might have been embarrassment. Maya, meanwhile, was having the time of her life, fully engaged in our conversation and occasionally raising her beer in subtle toasts that only we understood. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with alcohol and everything to do with the simple justice of it all. Sometimes the universe doesn't deliver karma. Sometimes you have to serve it yourself, one stolen stool at a time. When we finally decided to call it a night, we passed his table on our way out. He was still standing, still getting his hair rearranged by that relentless fan, and still pretending that standing was his choice all along. "Have a good night," Maya said sweetly as we walked by. And I swear I saw him flinch. Outside in the humid Manila air, we burst into laughter that had been building all evening. It wasn't just about a stool, really. It was about every time someone had taken something that wasn't theirs, every small injustice that goes unchallenged, Every moment when being polite means letting someone walk all over you. Sometimes you just have to take your seat back. That's the whole story for today. Honestly, this girl handled entitled behavior like a true Gryffindor with a Slytherin streak, maybe a 2 out of 10 Slytherins. She just gave back exactly what she got, with style. Sometimes you have to serve karma yourself, and she did it perfectly. What do you think? Was she right to take back that stool, or should she have let it slide? Drop your verdict in the comments below. That's all for today's story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. It really means a lot. And hey, if you're still craving more drama, mystery, or chaos, check out the next story right here on the screen. See you in the next one.